Good morning. The Insurance Committee of the Tennessee House of Representatives of the 113th General Assembly is now in session. The date is February 20, 2024, and the time is 10:36. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Representatives Sapicki, Davis, Freeman, Helton Haynes, Hemmer, Hicks of Hawkins, Hill, Johnson of Montgomery, Johnson of Knox, Lafferty, Mitchell, Ritchie, Rudd, Rudder, Sparks, Terry, Thompson, Vice Chairman Martin of Carroll, Chairman Kumar.
Here.
Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Members, do we have any personal orders? Chairlady Helton Haynes.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to introduce Hamilton County Commissioner Lee Helton. He also happens to be my son. Please stand up, Lee.
Any other personal orders, members? Seeing none, we do have 5 bills on the calendar, but we are making an exception this time and allowing our presenters to do their testimony. And this is because they have a prior engagement. We did send an email out to all the people who had bills on the calendar that we will be 15 to 20 minutes late. So from the Department of TennCare and Finance and Administration, Mr. David Thurman and Zane Seals. Mr. Thurman, you know the routine. Kindly make sure your mic is on and introduce yourself.
Thank you. David Thurman. I'm the director of the State Budget Office. And
I have to do some housekeeping. We have to go out of session. Please go ahead now.
Oh, thank you. David Thurman. I'm the director of the State Budget Office. And what I want to do is just kind of give you a brief overview about reversions and kind of what they are and what they look like and how they're generated, and then really how we use them in the budget. And it's really just 3 slides, but I'll kind of walk through that with you. So really kind of generally, what is a reversion? This is something that occurs at the end of year for closing, and it's really a factor of state funds that were appropriated but not utilized against in the budget and not spent. And when they're not spent, they come back to the general fund at the end of the year. They revert back to the general fund to be used in future budgets. And we use those in future budgets. We think of that as a non-recurring revenue source because it is. And we use that to fund the non-recurring things in the future budget. So think rainy day fund deposit. Think our capital budget. We've been able to have a really strong capital budget without bonds by using cash. We had a really strong cash position really in the last 3 years as a result of COVID and how that's worked. And we're glad to talk about that. So the source of reversions, underspending is really a few things. One, it's the vacant positions. So when we build a budget, we fully fund every position as if it's out the year. But there's turnover, there's hard to hire positions that we don't fill, and then there's vacancies that for whatever reason never get filled, even though we positions. So that is a source of annual underspending and reversions. And so again, thinking expenditures are less than the budgeted or expected amount. But also sometimes underspending occurs because when we fund a program or positions, there's a ramp up period, and it may not be spent beginning on July 1, even though we've budgeted 12 months worth of spending. So sometimes that slow ramp up can cause underspending as well. At the same time, again, think about a agency's enacted budget. They have an appropriation amount, and they may have a revenue estimate because they charge a fee or have a revenue source. And if they over collect that estimate, that's also part of an amount that comes back to the general fund at the end of the year. So let me kind of walk through the general math of how we do that. So again, it's about the enacted budget that's approved, that goes into effect on July 1. And at the end of the year, in June 30, the following year, we will compare the actual expenditures that have occurred against that enacted budget amount. And that difference, and again, we focus on state dollars, but that difference is really the agency's balance. That could revert, but before we do that, sometimes there are revenue streams in an agency's budget that have statutory reserve authority. And so they may set those dollars aside into a reserve. And so then that's not available to come back to the general fund at the end of the year. Also, in the appropriations bill, there's authority for agencies to carry forward an unspent balance for future spending. And a good example of that would be an appropriation or cost increase for an IT system. And that IT system may not completely be purchased and developed and implemented in that 12-month period. And so they ask for authority to carry forward that unspent balance for that specific purpose until that program is, or that purpose is expended. And so that will be a deduction from their balance. And so those two reductions against that balance is what I would call their adjusted balance that's available to come back to the general fund. Okay, so let me kind of walk through an example. An agency, this legislature approves a budget of $10 million, for example, and that's effective on July 1. They go through the next 12 months with that budget. They spend, they fill positions, they have vacancies, and whatever reason, they only spend $8 million of that $10 million appropriated budget. That means they have a $2 million balance that's left that's available to come back to the general fund unless they have statutory authority to keep some of it. Let's say they have a statutory allowance to keep $1 million back for a specific purpose. That would come off, that would be against that $2 million balance. And let's say they have an IT system that they're currently working to implement and they have an unspent balance there of $500,000. So as a result of that $2 million balance with those two adjustments for reserves and carry forwards, they have a adjusted balance of $500,000, and that would revert back to the general fund. That is the process that we do for every agency. And again, we have about 50 departments and agencies that we would go through this process with and accumulate those end of year balances that come back to the general fund. And that we don't think of that as a agency specific balance. It is just a pool of funds available to do all the things I mentioned before: capital, ECD, fast track grants in the next year, rainy day fund deposits, all those kinds of non-recurring things that you've seen in prior budgets. This is basically where it comes from. Again, from prior year spending, or prior year underspending. And I would remind you that that underspending is not a result of agencies not doing something that you've asked them to do. It's a result of them just having underspending as they work to implement your budget. And so there's some occasional savings. It has been extraordinary over the last 4 years because of COVID. If you recall, as we got into COVID, we received COVID response dollars, and we were allowed to use some of that to fund, offset some of the cost of programs and people that were in the front lines. So think correction, think healthcare. So we were able to offset some of those costs. As a result of that, it was really think of it as a funding swap. So we had already enacted a budget, then we received extra federal funding to cover that exact same cost. And so we didn't use the state dollars, and that came back to the general fund. So we've had those extraordinary things that have occurred in the last 4 years. And as a result of that, I would say we've had extraordinary underspending and extraordinary returns to the general fund. So let me stop there and see where your questions are.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. Member, you have questions? Chairman Spicky, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Thurman, for coming to testify and clear a lot of that up. Question for you. I believe in this last fiscal year, the reserve was 20 million. The reversion estimate was $20 million. Is that correct?
No, the reversion estimate was originally $78 million for the entire state budget. And then in the amendment, again, we worked with agencies to kind of see how they're tracking, and we increased it, I don't remember the dollar amount, significantly in the amendment.
Is it okay, Mr. Chairman?
You recognize.
Thank you. Approximately in TennCare, how much money was sent back during reversion in the last budget year?
So TennCare was, I want to say 703 million.
Chairman Speaker.
Is it okay, Mr. Chairman? That 703 million that was sent back to TennCare, was that sent back that to be used, like it said in the previous slide, to be used in the general, to be sent back to the general fund? Is that correct?
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Thurman.
Yes, sir, it was.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. In TennCare's reserve, was there any more money added back into the TennCare reserve?
So the TennCare reserve is $1.5 billion. It is right now, as we're proposed the budget, it's the same as it was last year, $1.5 billion. And that's, I don't know, 20% of their appropriation. So it's significant.
And then what accounted, what triggered, what event happened during the fiscal year that we weren't aware of that triggered the $700 million reversion?
Yeah, so the 700 is definitely extraordinary, but it is a result of really budget was enacted. At the same time, during the emergency health crisis, we were not allowed to work through redetermination. We had the enhanced match dollars, so we were getting more federal dollars than we normally do. When the health crisis ended, other states, I would say what we did is we banked some of that extra dollars into our reserve for TennCare to allow for that cost of redetermination once the health emergency ended. So we banked over $500 million to do that. When the health emergency ended, other states did not do what we had done and set the money aside, and they made some noise to Congress that they didn't have the money to do work through re-verification. And there were enough states that made that noise, so the Congress allowed for that enhanced FMAP to continue at a step-down basis to allow dollars to accumulate to cover the cost of redetermination as they work through it. So again, budget was enacted. We received the enhanced match, weren't expecting to get it, and we didn't need it to fund the re-verification. So as a result, that funding swap occurred. It freed up state dollars in 23 of the 600 million I mentioned, and allowed us to keep the reserve at the same level and come back to general fund for other purposes, along with other agencies as well. So there were other departments that had that.
Chairman Speaker.
Did, at the time of the budget, when it was created by TennCare, was TennCare aware and was finance aware of the situation of this overpayment?
Yes.
Mr. Thurman.
Yes, sir.
And what was their response?
Well, so a lot of discussion internally about, again, the size of the reserve and the need of what that reserve needed to look like to cover the cost of re-verification going forward and other costs. So we're using some of it for other things, IT systems, and so a lot of discussion about what that reserve looked like. And the result of that discussion, again, with my commissioner, with the director of TennCare and the CFO and others, we felt comfortable that we could return $600 million back to the general fund and still meet all the obligations going forward for other things I just mentioned.
Chairman Speaker.
Are you aware at the time? Are you aware at the time when the money went back to the general fund? Are you aware of if there was a deficit in our budget in the state of Tennessee and how much it was?
Well, yes. So we knew that we had ended 23 with an under collection of revenue for sure.
And what was the dollar amount?
333 million.
And so that money going back from TennCare went into the general fund. That would have gone a long way to shore up that budget. Is that correct?
It was part of the solution.
Part of the solution. And so none of that money, none of that 700 million that went back to the general fund, was any of that money used to be put back into TennCare to build their reserve?
Well, so no, because the reserve is already at $1.5 billion.
Is there a statutory requirement that it can't go over $1.5 billion?
No, there's not.
And that would have been an opportunity to return more money to 10-care reserve, which would have allowed us more flexibility in the future if we got into a crisis to be able to pull from that?
Well, I mean, there's no limit to how much, to what the reserve could be, so we could do that, yes.
Okay. I'll let someone go else, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So what you're saying is that you had the option of keeping that money to add to your reserve or return it to the general fund.
Yes.
And how was that decision made?
Well, again, it was a internal discussion with, with TennCare and my commissioner and others about, really what the right size of that carry forward needed to be based on the requirements of need. And then after we felt like it was at the appropriate level, it was just a matter of how much we needed to bring back to the general fund. And I will remind you that last year, 700 is the reversion for 23. The year prior to that for TennCare was 500. And again, it's the same process.
Is the reserve at a historical high or is that about average?
I think it's historical high. Yep.
Thank you. Representative Hemmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, David, for your presentation. Just curious, when there are reversion amounts such as this, is the fiscal review or the finance committees notified in any way?
No.
I think where I'm surprised at, and it sounds like some other members of the committee are as well, is when you have things like this that are presented to us in the budget period last year, but then we come to find out later that there's these large sums, and I do know it doesn't happen often, but it just seems like it's a sleight of hand budget trick versus, we're fully informed and know what's going on. And so maybe the ask moving forward is to, when there are reversions of note or certain things, that at least, that's communicated better to either the finance committee or fiscal review.
Okay.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Well, do you have a response, Mr. Thurman?
Well, yeah, you're right. It was extraordinary. The last 4 years have been extraordinary under collections or reversions that have occurred. And I guess we do disclose it and we roll out the budget. We don't usually know the final disposition of our closing balance until mid-November, early November. But we can do that. I think it's just,
Very well. Representative Mitchell?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern is the statement you just made. The year before, you knew you had a $500 million reversion. So you knew the feds were giving more, overpaying because of the health crisis situation. So you knew that was probably ongoing because it had been the year before. So instead of budgeting like that was going to happen again, you budgeted as it was going away. And it continues to bother me that, we keep acting like TennCare is, it's not a financial institution. TennCare was created to provide health care for the least among us in our state. And to hear $700 million reverted back, when I know there's probably at least 300,000 uninsured here in this state. As one of my colleagues down here said, why didn't you put it in TennCare Reserve so we can then make decisions? Do we want to cover more things in TennCare? Do we want to cover more people? But we shore up a hole in the budget on the backs of, I would say, the 300,000 people who don't have health care in this state. That's my problem with it. And, I know you didn't make the decision. I want to know who made that decision to plug a hole in the budget instead of putting it into TennCare.
so I guess a couple things. We did not know we're going to get the enhanced FMAP until the feds decided to continue. We knew it was going to end. And so the budget that was enacted assumed that was going to happen. And when they decided to continue the enhanced MEP at a step down level, that was not assumed that was going to happen. The $1.5 billion in reserve for TennCare is 40% of their appropriation. So I feel like, with our discussion, and I was in the room when we decided how much, kind of work through that reversion amount. We all felt like that was sufficient to cover any extraordinary things, and some of it was set aside for specific purposes for sure.
Representative Mitchell.
Again, it's $1.5 billion of the people we currently have on TennCare, but we have 300,000 other Tennesseans who don't have health coverage in the state. So I think that should be our decision to make, whether we're going to use that $700 million to help cover those 300,000 or not. It shouldn't be some commissioner's plugging of his budget gap. Last time I checked, we hold the purse strings.
So I think if we did that, we would, I guess, as a budget person, I would fund that with recurring dollars. And I look at this underspending as non-recurring, that's not available to do recurring programs and expand recurring programs. So I think we'll be careful with that. But I think I understand what you're saying.
Well, thank you. A point of clarification, those 300,000 people that are not covered and are without coverage in our state, do they qualify according to our current criteria?
I'm going to need some help here.
Kindly make sure your mic is on and identify yourself.
Good morning. Zane Sills, Chief Financial Officer for TennCare. As far as the 300,000, I'm not exactly sure exactly which population you're referring to there. My guess is that is a reference to the potential expansion population. If we chose to expand Medicaid here in Tennessee, it's roughly in the ballpark of what that population would be. That population is currently not eligible for TennCare.
So we will have to change eligibility criteria before any funds could be used towards that.
There would have to be significant changes and an authorization of additional funds and
Sure.
changing of the eligibility criteria for that population to be eligible.
Chairman Spicky, you're recognized.
Thank you. And just to follow up here, last year was 500 million-ish reverted back into the general fund. This year it's 700 million. First clarification question is, has this overpayment from the federal government stopped in this budget year? Or are we potentially looking at another 500 to 700 million of reversion coming back into the general fund?
Ms. Sales?
Is your question for this fiscal year 24? So the enhanced federal matching percentage has already phased down. It no longer exists. We're no longer getting those additional funds. So we're not expecting another massive surplus at the end of fiscal year 24 as had occurred previously.
Point of clarification on that though. The budget's been enacted since July 1st. At the beginning of this budget in July 1st, was that enhancement still being collected?
The enhancement, yes, sir. The enhancement was collected through December 31st of 23, but it was at a greatly reduced level. It was stepping down the entire time per federal law.
And according to the budget right now, what is the reversion estimate for TennCare?
Our current reversion, well, I'll let you speak to that. I believe it's TBD.
Original budget, July 1 was 20. And then when we started having revenue weakness in our collections, I sent a letter and asked all agencies to change their reversion target amount to reflect a higher number. And I don't remember, we had not really determined a number yet with TennCare because we wanted to live in their budget a little bit longer.
In the budget year that had the $500 million reversion, was FNA aware of the overpayment, the enhancement from the federal government.
Yes.
And in the budget after that, once again, was F&A aware of the overpayment from the federal government, the enhancement?
Yes, sir.
And in the budget this year that we're living in right now, we just heard that the enhancements was still enacted in July 1st and still collected through December. Was F&A aware of that was happening in this year also?
I think so, yes.
Okay. Do you have an estimate right now, based off of what you've experienced of those payments, what potential reversion amount, because I know we just heard it was 20 million, what potential reversion amount are we looking from TennCare to go back into a general fund when we've heard that we're on a tight budget year?
Yeah, I don't know that yet. Normally what we do is after the budget rolls out, we circle back with all agencies to check in about how are they doing? They have any budget issues, and what does it look like their end of year spending is going to look like? So we haven't done that yet.
And would it be safe to, would it be, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, the 700 million that went back in when we were already facing a budget shortfall,
Yes.
did that money go somewhere? Did it go to shore up our budget so that we would not have a budget shortfall and be short? And then the second follow-up question to that is, why wasn't the reserve used? That has $2 billion in it. Isn't that what it's for?
The rainy day fund?
Yes, sir.
Well, I think it was not used, and I feel like, I don't know if I believe it's in law, but I think I am instructed to look at all other options before I use the rainy day fund. And so we had closing balances for sure as our first stop, over collections on revenues, which was not there to look at. And then we also look at other reserves prior to looking at the rainy day. So as we went through that progression, didn't need to look at the rainy day fund.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Members, in the interest of time, last question is for Representative Johnson.
Thank
You're
you,
recognized.
Mr. Chairman. I don't know that I have a question. I just want to say that to me, it's just a travesty that this money didn't go to the health of Tennesseans. And again, as my colleague stated, we have the ability to change those qualifications so that more people can be healthy in Tennessee.
Well, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. We will go back into session and start with our regular calendar. First item on our calendar is House Bill 0949 by Chairman Boyd. Do I have a motion? We have a motion and a second. Chairman Boyd, you're recognized on House Bill 0949.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And there's an amendment that was put on in subcommittee, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, we have 010288. So we have motion and second to adopt amendment 010288 to House Bill 0949. All those in favor please say aye. Opposed? The amendment goes on the bill. Kindly explain the amended bill to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman of the committee. And Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd like to welcome all of the dentists that have come here today for the Tennessee Dental Association Day on the Hill that are here to hear this bill. So if y'all can make them feel welcome.
Welcome. Welcome. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So House Bill 949, otherwise known as the 2024 Dental Insurance Reform Bill, kind of brings the relationship between dentists and the dental insurance companies into the 21st century. And so the Tennessee Dental Association brought this bill after surveying dentists across the state about some top issues. This bill will ensure that dentists are paid correctly when they perform a procedure for their patient, and it cleans up areas of code where dental insurance carriers and dentists alike have conflicting implementation of the law, and we've worked with all the major insurance carriers. Mr. Chairman, I'll take any questions.
Members, you've heard a brief explanation. Do you have questions? Representative Chairman Spickey, you're recognized.
Very quickly, members, Chairman Boyd, I really do appreciate you drilling down on this and filling this cavity.
I guess that is not out of order, is it? Any other quips? Okay. Yes, you did call that. We are voting on House Bill 0949. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? The bill moves on to calendar and rules.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee.
Item number 2 is House Bill 2445 by Representative Alexander. We have a motion and a second on House Bill 2445. Representative Alexander, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, committee. Emma's bill came to me from someone in my community that we decided we needed to work on something because of the situation they're in. I have him down to testify on this bill. I don't know if you would like me to tell you about the bill a little bit first, or just to hear his story so that you can know why we're doing this bill.
I think it'll be good to know a little bit about the
Okay.
bill, then he can justify in his story.
Okay, sounds great. What this bill does is, in Emma's situation, she went away to college, came back with a virus that attacked her brain, and her body attacked her brain. And so she's non-responsive. She's on a ventilator. She's got a trach. He'll tell you more about this. But what happened to them was, when Emma was able, because TennCare has set marks for how much they pay for a person's care based on the ventilator. And this child needs 24/7 care. And so when she reduced her amount of hours on the ventilator from 12 to 8 hours, their funding was cut. And so this bill just asks TennCare to take a look and have the Bureau take into consideration other patients' overall conditions and not just the ventilator only. So we're asking them to consider the patient's mobility or ability to move or turn, the patient's cognitive awareness and ability to communicate, the patient's need for constant nursing supervision. Emma chokes, so there has to be people there all the time watching her, because she can't tell them she's choking, but she chokes. And the patient's need for a ventilator or other life-sustaining equipment. And that's what the bill does. It just asks them to look at other things other than just how many hours someone is on a ventilator.
Thank you. Are we ready for the testimony? We will go out of session. I have Mr. Mark Herod. Mr. Herod, welcome. Be sure your mic red light is on.
Yes, sir.
And you please do identify yourself for the record, and you have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Mark Herod, and I am Emma's father, the one for whom the bill is named. I ask you to bear with me this morning because not only am I nervous, but I'm a Baptist preacher who has been given 3 minutes to talk. It might not be on par with the Red Sea, but it will be a miracle nonetheless. In 2016, my daughter Emma began her freshman year at Bryan College. She was studying to be a midwife with the dream of going overseas. In November of 2016, she called complaining of a headache and chills. We took her to see her doctor, who immediately sent her to the ER. Although her symptoms pointed toward meningitis, the test results said otherwise. Emma's vitals were going up and down like a child on a trampoline. On November 20th, she suffered a seizure and slipped into a coma. On November 23rd, she was transported to the University of Tennessee Medical Center, where she stayed in the neurointensive care unit for 6 weeks. Emma was diagnosed with acute disseminated encephalomyelitis and necrotizing encephalopathy. Basically, her body attacked her brain. No reason was found. There was no precipitating factor. It just happened. Emma eventually stabilized and was transferred to another hospital in Knoxville. This was good news, but it was quickly followed by the heartbreaking news that doctors considered her terminal. They believed she would not live past 6 months. We were then moved to a hospice house in Bristol, Tennessee, where we lived for 10 months. Emma is my middle child and has always been stubborn, so she refused to give up. And by the grace of God, she began to improve to the point where she no longer qualified for hospice care. We brought her home on December 26th of 2017. My wife and I take care of Emma. She cannot move on her own. She is nonverbal, communicating only with a nod or a shake of her head. She has a tracheostomy and uses a feeding tube and a ventilator at night. Her improvement has been slow. I liken it to a marathon measured in inches. We are grateful for the help that we have received from our neighbors and our fellow Tennesseans through TennCare. We would not be here today without it. Last year, we were informed that since Emma no longer uses the ventilator for 12 hours at night, her funding was going to be reduced per the law. This meant a loss of nursing care for Emma. Our life is challenging, and the loss of this nursing care only added to the mountains we have to climb. We were given a hearing last May. We submitted letters from her doctors stating that the loss of nursing care would be detrimental to Emma and to us because of the level of care she requires. The judge, however, dismissed our case, telling us that the law was clear. The patient has to be on the ventilator for 12 hours. The bill you are considering would allow the entire condition of the patient to be considered rather than only one metric. I believe that justice and wisdom means taking all things into account before making a decision. Emma's bill would allow the medical review team at TennCare the ability to hear and to make a decision justly on the total needs of the patient. Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of Emma and my family.
Thank you. Is it Pastor Herod?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You did accomplish the 3-minute miracle.
Oh, thank you.
Um,
Praise God.
You have we are grateful to you for coming up and opening your heart and explaining things. And we are grateful to Representative Alexander for bringing us this bill. Members, do we have questions? Again, you have our sympathies and concerns for you with what has happened to Emma and how you have taken care of her. God bless you, sir. We will go back into session. Do we have questions for Representative Alexander? Representative Freeman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the sponsor, thank you for sharing this bill with us and for bringing someone in to testify. I just would like to voice support and urge the rest of the committee to support. We just heard that we sent $700 million back to the general fund. And that $700 million could have been used to fund this fiscal note, for 77 years. There is the money if there's a will to do it. And this certainly, in my opinion, seems like something that we should support. So as we move forward to vote, again, assuming that this fiscal note remains and is accurate, I just would really encourage us to take into account that we're likely to have another reversion this year, and would that money be better suited treating the Tennesseans and the people that need it in the program that it was meant to be funded, rather than going back to the general fund. So anyway, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Alexander, do you have a comment?
No. Any questions for me?
Seeing no further questions, members, are we ready to vote? Without objection, we are voting on House Bill 2445. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The bill moves on to Finance, Ways and Means. Thank you. Item 3 on our calendar, House Bill 1939, is rolled by 1 week on the sponsor's request. Number 4, we have House Bill 2104 by Representative Dixie. We have a motion and a second. Representative Dixie, you're recognized on House Bill 2104.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I start, I just want to let you know today is a special day. Today is my oldest brother Steve's, he probably won't want me to say this, but 62nd birthday. But it's also my wedding anniversary. So I'm spending it here with you on my 25th wedding anniversary. And my wife, Erica, is out there with me. So remember that when you start voting on this. And lastly, she was saying that when she walked in, Doc, you always send us a Christmas card. She's like, he always sends us a Christmas card. So I'm not trying to influence your vote, but just let her know she recognized you. So thank you. I appreciate you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me, indulging me that time to say that. So this bill, what it does, it will allow the state plans to pay for a annual mental health wellness checkup, just as we do for an annual wellness checkup. We know that mental health is an issue that we have in this state, and we are trying to attack it the best way we can. And we talked about this. We understand that sometimes doctors are overworked, and sometimes they have to see patients on a quick basis. And sometimes just may boil down to a question. It's like, how are you feeling today? Are you mental health? Yeah, okay. But this will allow a person to actually spend 45 minutes with a mental health professional to dive into, and it's just once a year, just as a checkup. And with that explanation, I will take any questions.
Thank you. Just for clarification, does this bill, how will that work? A person has to ask their healthcare provider to be referred for mental health care, or it seems everybody's entitled to it, right?
Yes.
Okay. So a patient has to ask for it, or the provider has to determine that this person needs mental health consultation.
Currently, that's how it is. This would just say like how you call up, you find your primary physician. You should be able to find a mental health professional and make an appointment with them directly instead of having a referral. Because sometimes when the doctor goes in, they can miss a sign. Sometimes people can fool someone while they're in seeing their doctors for 15, 20 minutes, or they may not feel comfortable with discussing it. This way, a person can have access to a mental health professional and build a relationship with them. So if they ever are in crisis, they're a little bit more familiar with them. Just as if we go see our primary care doctor, if we have a pain in our side, instead of masking and saying, no, I'm okay, we'll be more likely to say, hey, doc, I'm really having this issue and it's been happening for three months. And then the doctor say, are you still smoking? And then the doctor has that relationship and say, oh yeah, well, maybe if you stop smoking, maybe your side will stop hurting. Things of that nature. So if someone is ever in mental health crisis, they will already be familiar with a mental health professional.
Coming back to the mental health situation, so what is the difference that this bill will make in the sense that at this time, during a primary health care checkup, a physician, as they take a history and examination and review the symptoms, are able to gauge that this person will benefit from a mental health consultation or evaluation. Or a patient can say that I'm having these difficulties, I would like one. If under the current circumstances, if these statements are made, then the person would be referred for mental health care. So what would this bill add? What would be the difference here?
This is an additional layer that someone can actually see a mental health professional, somebody who is trained, and for 45 minutes they can talk. Sometimes people don't realize that they have issue or the additional stresses that they have on them. And this is an opportunity. Or I'm not answering the question that you're asking.
I'm not getting it in the sense. What I'm saying is today a patient goes to see their primary health care provider examines, takes the history and other things, and at that time decides, because of certain things that they discover, that this person will benefit from mental health evaluation. Or a patient can say, I'm having these difficulties. So that is the current system, and the system exists. Now, what will this system add, except for the 45 minutes?
This will allow a person to directly contact a mental health professional without a referral. Does that answer your question?
Okay, I'll have to think about it. Let's move on.
Because my point is saying before we move on, is we're counting on that physician to be the backstop when he has 20 or 30 patients he has to see that day. You're lucky if we get 15 to 20 minutes with our primary care physician in most instances, not all instances, but in most instances. And sometimes they just check off. It's a checklist. How are you feeling today? Are you mental health? Are you eating? Are you safe? and they just go down the checklist. But if you have 45 minutes with a mental health professional, you have time to sit down, decompress, and really dig into it to see if this person needs more counseling, need medication, more therapy sessions, anything. So I think this is an additional layer to make sure that we're taking mental health seriously in the state of Tennessee.
Representative Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate how you talked about you could call the mental health person directly. I remember that my first family physician was a good friend of my parents. And I've known him since I was a young adult to probably until he retired, when I was around 30. So I don't know that I would have felt comfortable discussing mental health issues with him. I know I wouldn't have wanted to ask him for a referral. I would have rather, did that on my own. So I see value in perhaps you don't want to have that conversation with your physician that maybe knows your whole family and that sort of thing. So when you gave that part of an explanation, it kind of showed me the importance of going in a different direction. So I appreciate that part of the bill.
Thank you. Representative Ritchie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, sponsor, for the bill. So clarity-wise on the normal procedure that we have right now, it's not going to change that at all. All this is creating kind of like a bypass lane to where if somebody wanted to go directly to a mental health provider is what the intent of this is.
Yes. And I'll share a little personal story with you, which, sometimes I get up here and I talk too much. But when I was coming up, my mother, she battled with depression really bad when it was going up. And, she was hospitalized. And so that's why mental health is very important to me and to take it seriously. Especially us men, we kind of think that we're too tough and we won't sit down and have this conversation. But sometimes we all need to slow down and just give ourselves a mental check, just a break, just to see how we're doing, to keep it moving. If we're doing okay, keep it moving. If you're not, let's just slow down and talk to somebody. Let's take the stigma away from what mental health professionals do, away from what the society thinks it is. It needs to become more normalized.
Well, thank you. Is it not the system at this time that a person who wants to seek a mental health professional can go and see them directly, or or do they have to go through a primary care only?
At some point, I think most jobs have what they call the EAP, Employee Assistance Program, but it doesn't mandate or it doesn't require insurance plans to pay for it or for people to encourage them to see them. This bill only encourages people to see a mental health professional on a regular basis so that hopefully we can stop some of the things that we have going on in society with the mass shootings and things, that we can kind of catch some on the front end and before it gets critical mass and we start counting bodies instead when we could have seen this on the front end. So
Representative Mitchell, you recognize.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I look at it like your health plan, you've got the one free annual visit each and every year. I think this is what the sponsor is aiming at, this for insurance to cover that one visit. And I think this is a cost savings measure. It's kind of like if you can get, Mr. Chairman, if you get somebody into their annual visit and we can catch hypertension or something else to stop heart attacks and strokes, it saves a lot of money. If we can catch mental illness on the front end and get people the medication or the help they need, it's going to save a lot of money on the back end. So, and I think with the lack of number of mental health professionals that are in networks now, this would push a lot of them to get in networks to make the accessibility to more Tennesseans available for more Tennesseans to get the help they need. Right now, to find a mental health professional for youth or adolescents in network, you might as well forget it. Good luck to you. So I think this is a great cost saving measure, and it will also, provide a lot more care to more Tennesseans and solve a lot of problems before they start. Thanks.
Thank you. Chairman Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And there's a bill in here somewhere. There is. But I think this is not the bill. It's a bill, but this is not the bill that I think is going to solve the problem. The relationship that I have with my primary care physician is a casual one that I talk to openly to, and could open the door for a diagnosis of that casual conversation that I have with him on my periodic visits, seeing a change in me and recognize a change in me that could make that mental health referral. We are already stressed to the limits with mental health care professionals. And by allowing people to just bypass your primary care physician to go right to the mental health, it could exacerbate a problem we already have, to where now the backlog of getting people help gets more and more and more. Also, in education, dipping into education here, we provide massive incentives in Hope Scholarship and Pell Grants and all kinds of things for people to go to college and become these professionals, and they're just not wanting to do it at the numbers that we need. And we all know, coming from education again, that the need we have in our school systems for these professionals is probably far outpassing what society is right now in general. I think there's a bill here, but I'm not comfortable with the position it's in, especially saying that it's got to be 45 minutes. We have casual conversations up here that last more than 45 minutes. And you're talking about doing a mental health evaluation. Like I said, I think there's a bill here, but Mr. Chairman, I can't support this bill in its current form. But I think there's something here to be worked on. I'd make a motion for summer study on this bill.
We have a motion. Do I have a second? What is it? Does it get to respond? Yeah. Representative Dixie, you're recognized.
I like to disagree with you. When you talk about a strain on the healthcare system, I mean, we have a strain on physicians. How hard is it to get in to see a physician? You can call your physician right now. You might not get an appointment for another 3 or 4 months. This is an opportunity to drive more mental health professionals to Tennessee. One, we need to look at the reimbursement rates, things of that nature, to help people want to become a mental health professional. I think 45 minutes is a very good amount of time for a checkup. I highly doubt that anybody's spending 45 minutes with their primary care physician right now getting their annual physical. If you are, then your doctor's doing a great job, and he's probably not making much money. So I think that what you're giving me is excuses rather than trying to find a solution to pass this bill, because everything you said is it's not really applicable for what's going on here. I mean, this is an opportunity to say that we're going to take mental health seriously. We're going to do something about it. We're going to find a solution. To say there's a bill here and to put in a summer study, I think that's the wrong thing to do here. But also, if we do move for this, I don't know if this motion is still moving forward, but we'll see what happens. But I just think that your conclusions are incorrect and your assumptions are incorrect. I think this is an opportunity to drive more people to getting more help before they need it, before it becomes a crisis. I think it's a way to help drive more mental health professionals into Tennessee and hopefully in our schools. And I think that we need to just take this bill seriously and move it on. And hopefully this can move forward the conversation of mental health and taking it seriously in Tennessee.
Thank you, Representative Dixie. We do understand and admire your concerns and share your concerns about mental health and the needs in our community, in our society, definitely. I had still wondered how this aligns with the federal Mental Health Parity Act of 1996 and 2008. So those are things that do need to be aligned. And I think Chairman Speaker's suggestion that the matter needs further study. We are going to go ahead and put it to, we have a motion and a second. Members, without objection, we are voting on we have a motion and a second we are voting on. And you have given your response.
Can I just add one more thing, if it's appropriate? If it's not, I would, rather than having a vote a motion to roll it to summer study, I just rather have a rather flat out up or down, and then either it's yes or no, and I like to have a roll call vote. I don't want to prolong the inevitable. Either
Well-
either it's a good bill or it's not. We can roll it up or down.
Thank
And
you.
I like a
Once
roll
we
call
have a
vote.
motion and second, it cuts off further debate. And thank you for your response. Members, we are voting on House Bill 2104 going to summer study. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? No. Okay, ayes have it. The bill moves on to summer study. Our last item on the bill is House Bill 1826. Do I have a motion? We have a motion and a second, House Bill 1826. Vice Chair Martin, you recognize.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I do have an amendment traveling with this one.
Yes, we have amendment 013686.
That is correct. It's a TennCare friendly amendment for my friends.
Do I have a motion on this amendment? And a second. So let us attach the amendment. All those in favor of attaching amendment 13686 to House Bill 1826, please say aye. Opposed? The amendment goes on the bill. And Chairman Martin, tell us about your amended bill.
Absolutely. I'm pleased and honored to carry this legislation as a healthcare provider. I believe this is kind of good healthcare policy that can help our most vulnerable Tennesseans, our chronically ill children. This bill is ethically and morally sound for the parents. It's fast, effective for the children, and a massive cost savings over the long haul for the TennCare as well as our Tennesseans. This will make possible the use of rapid whole genome sequencing for chronically ill children in our NICUs and PICUs across the state. This type of testing is typically used within the first year of life, which will help provide quick and definitive answers for our providers and also for those families of those children. This testing can identify generic variants associated with rare diseases and help diagnose the condition quicker. The cost savings is built into this. Currently in Tennessee, these children can stay up to 18 months in our NICUs and PICUs as we're trying to differentiate what's going on and what condition the child has. With this rapid genome testing, we're able to figure out the diagnosis 70% of the time in 7 to 10 days. So for the cost of an MRI, we're able to use this test to figure out what's going on and get those kids out of the hospital faster and then on to their healing in a quicker state. Currently, this just passed Florida last year after their pilot study showed a $2.8 million savings to their Medicaid plan down there. So I humbly ask for your support and I stand ready for questions.
Members, you heard the explanation. Do you have questions? Well, I think they've had thinking time, but there are no questions. So without objection, we are voting on House Bill 1826. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? The bill moves on to government operations. Congratulations. Thank you.
Committee and chair.
Members, is there any other business to come before the committee? Seeing none, we stand adjourned.